So for those of you who don't know, my name is Leanne. I'm a graduate assistant here at the University Career Center, and this meetup is part of the NDEAM series, which is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Thank you for being here. And today we have Luana Hill from Truist, and she's going to be talking about what it's like to be interviewing with a disability. And it's going to be a lot of conversation based. So feel free to put some questions in the chat or even use the raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can unmute yourself. So I'm going to turn it over to Luana and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself and what she does over at Truist.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So like Leanne said, my name is Luana Hill. I am a senior university recruiter here at Truist. I've been with the bank for about 5 years now, but I've been recruiting for about 15 years. Came into the disability space unexpectedly. My husband about 8 years ago fell and got a traumatic brain injury, and obviously that catapulted me into the disability space and just learning more about it and seeing some of the inequalities that happened and some of the struggles that people with disabilities have to go through. And that helped me co-lead the disability group, the business resource group here at Truist, and it really amplified the voice of disabled people, teammates, communities, and really empower people to do the best that they can. It doesn't make us any less of a person for having a disability. It just makes us a whole person. We are all different in every way. So having a disability is nothing to be ashamed of. And I'm really proud to work for a company that explores that, allows us to play with that, allows us to be our authentic selves. I literally just got off of a internal call because we're celebrating NDEAM here as well. And it was about accessibility in digital and physical spaces. And one of our teammates got to go on and talk about her non-visible visibility. She struggles with ADHD and was talking about some of the executive dysfunction that she has and how that shows up for her in the workplace. And one of the things that she said that really resonated with me was, and I'm thankful to work at a place that allows me not only to have those things, but be able to come on a call and talk about those things so I can educate others about it. And that is the approach that we take. We really want to learn from our teammates. We want to learn from people with all walks of life, including disabilities, on how we can be a better company to work for and to serve our clients and all of the above. So that's a little bit of who I am and what I am hoping to represent. Truist is a values-based organization. Our purpose is to build and inspire better lives and communities. One of the things that I love the most about that is that in nowhere does it say financially. So we can all do it from our seats, and we can all build and inspire better lives and communities from the seat in which we have. Our values are our foundation and our guideposts, if you will, and they are trustworthiness, caring, success, one team, and happiness. And those things are usually not attached to a financial institution. So that's also what I find fascinating about this place is that those are the things that kind of hold us together. So I am happy to entertain any questions and really talk through this from your perspective. What do you want to know from a recruiter, from an employer, from someone who has a disability and cares for those with disabilities, all of those types of things that I'm going to open the floor and just be an open book about it.
Great, thank you so much. I'll ask the first question. I'm curious. I'd love to know about maybe any advice you would give to students who might be interviewing with a disability, and what are some guidelines that maybe they should go in expecting, or any of that that topic. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And so disability is a very broad term, and it's going to show up very differently for very different people. Here at Truist, we are trying to level the playing field and make sure that our interviews are disability friendly as well. But I would say be your own best advocate. So if you need something, say it ahead of time. If you need to have your video off for whatever reason, you can say that up front instead of just not showing up on video. You can say, hey, I have a condition. You don't have to disclose what it is, that I would really prefer not to be on video, whatever it is. I just got a candidate who's on the spectrum, and I chatted with him and I try to understand his skill set. We're also a big thing to know. We are a skill-based organization, so we are about putting you where the skill best suits you. I am not about filling my seat. I'm about filling the best seat for you. And so have that open conversation with your recruiter. Talk to them about what you need and how you need to show up. The recruiter's job really is to put your best foot forward. I think that a lot of people have this misconception that we are the gatekeepers in a negative way, that we are going to be the ones to X you out and just move on to the next thing. Yes, there's some of that goes on, but if you communicate with your recruiter, 9 out of 10 times, they're going to help you through the process. They want you to succeed because your success is our success. And so just make sure that ahead of schedule, you're asking about what types of interviews are we gonna have? Am I supposed to expect? So generally they're behavior based. So that means to think of a time when you did X, Y, or Z. In this era of digital world and being on Zoom calls for interviews, have a screen up with some notes. There's nothing that says that you're not allowed to have that. Don't read them verbatim if you can help that, but you can say, hey, I'm going to reference some notes over here if you don't mind, and take your time, answer the questions with the skills that you have. Don't pretend to be somebody you're not, because that's gonna show up eventually, and you need to find a home where it's going to accept you wholeheartedly, and you have to be unapologetically you. So just show up as you are and just ask for what you need, and we'll be able to help you through the process.
Great. I mean, what would you suggest to a student if they're in an interview or talking with a recruiter, and maybe they say something uncomfortable or ask something that you don't feel comfortable disclosing? What do you think would be the best way to navigate that situation?
Again, you are your own best advocate. As much as I would hope that everyone would have, if you're talking to a recruiter, generally speaking, they know what to steer away from, but not every hiring manager might. So they may ask you some questions that by law you're not allowed to, or you don't have to disclose. And so you can say, I'm not ready to disclose that information at the interview process, or I'm not required to give you this information in the interview process. You can school them as well. And then that'll make them feel probably silly for asking that question, and just making sure that they are not tiptoeing into a space that you don't have to answer. You don't have to answer those.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. Let's see. So let's say we're in an interview and there might be some recent gaps in your work history based because of your disability, but you don't necessarily feel comfortable disclosing your disability quite yet. How would you navigate that?
Just like anybody else would, if they took time to have a baby or work on their mental health. It was time that I needed to regroup and to put my best foot forward. I needed some time to you can do whatever you want here without disclosing if you don't feel comfortable disclosing. But you can talk about it was time that you needed in order to get your health together. And that's completely appropriate.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have questions? I don't want to take up the entire floor if anyone else wants to ask something. How would you suggest that a student maybe prepare for an interview if they're nervous about disclosing, maybe some resources or techniques that you would suggest or have seen?
It depends on your disability. Again, I mean, I think that some disabilities you may need some accommodations on the front end, and so that might be something that you're probably going to need to do. But if you don't have to, and you don't feel comfortable doing that, wait until you get an offer and then disclose it. You do not have to. It is legally, you don't have to, and it's entirely up to you to be able to do that. You are a human. You are a capable human. You are being interviewed for a job. And the only thing that interviewers should be doing is assessing you for the skill sets for that job. So if anything else is a great part of that, that doesn't belong there. So you don't have to do any of those things. But again, connect with the recruiter, ask them about it. Make sure that you have an advocate with you. And if you need, I've had interviews where people brought their coaches, their training coaches, and made sure that the answer was being translated in the way that it needed to. So don't shy away from your skill set.
Great, thank you. We have some questions in the chat, so I'm just going to go ahead and read those. Cheyenne said, I am an employer, so I'm curious on the other side, what can we do to make people with disabilities comfortable during an interview? And also, what does Truist do within the workplace to support individuals with disabilities?
Yeah, I think that the best way to make people comfortable in any situation is to ask them for what they need. So, you know, again, we are all different people. I've had the epiphany that, you know, I generally talk to a group of people and they're all in these little squares. And, you know, I keep looking for the head nods. I keep looking for the people who are giving me the affirmation that I need. And I was in a call one time and we were talking about just the anxiety of being on camera and, you know, feeling like your house is a mess in the background or whatever it is. And a teammate IMs me and says, thank you so much for saying that out loud, because I just don't feel comfortable being on camera because of my anxiety. And no one really understands that. And that moment right there just completely shifted my mindset. Here I am looking at students to give me affirmation. That is a me ask. That is not a student ask, and that is not what they need or want. And I wasn't being, not that I wasn't being inclusive, but I wasn't thinking from their perspective. And so don't assume anything. Ask the question, how do you prefer to X, Y, or Z? And go from there. It's no different than taking somebody out to lunch to a steakhouse, but they're a vegetarian. So it is just asking them, if you and I are going to meet and we're going to go to lunch, what do you want? What do you prefer? And going with that thought process. And yes, we do have the business resource group. We have several people that work directly with disability, whether it's physical accessibility, digital accessibility, the HR group that gives people any of the things that they need in order to perform their job better. The one thing that I'll say that we struggle with is people disclosing, because I think that there's a lot of stigma still around, if I disclose, I'm going to be perceived as X, Y, or Z. And I wish that they knew that that's not the case. We are asking them so that we could work towards a better place to work and a better employee everything for the future. And so if we don't know, we don't know. And again, disability is so broad. And I don't know what other people will need if they don't tell me. I can read about it and I can try to be as inclusive as possible, but sometimes we only see the world through our own lens, and that's not anyone's fault. It's just the way that we're hardwired. So if I had one big thing I would ask is for people to proudly wear their disability badge of honor. You're here for a reason and you're working through it, and be your own best advocate. Don't be ashamed of it. Just show up and say, this is what I need. And every workplace should be able to give you that access to make your better self.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Luana. I'm curious, when you say digital accessibility, what type of stuff do you guys do for that, since so many things are online now? I'm curious.
Yeah, so we actually have, and I'm going to butcher, I don't know the technical names. But we have people who, as they're building the websites, as they're building our mobile apps, as they're building all of the things, they run it through focus groups of disabled team, or not necessarily teammates, but the community, to ensure that if they can't use their extremities, how could you do this? If they don't have their sight, how could you do this? If you need the read because of the hearing impairment, how do you do? So all of those things they test and retest behind themselves to make sure that we are serving everyone. So again, I don't know the technical aspects of it all, but I do know that we have this in-house, that we are making sure that these things are easy for people to navigate regardless of how they navigate it.
Awesome. What do you think one of the biggest challenges you've seen that maybe students coming in right after graduation with disability has, or just in general as you're recruiting for Truist?
The imposter syndrome is real. People feel like they don't belong. People feel like they can't be their authentic selves. And I think that the one thing that COVID did well for us was to showcase our true selves. People with kids in the background, all of a sudden they would run in and everybody would freeze, and it became normal. And so it became really clear that we are our whole selves 100% of the time. We don't have to be a certain person at work and then another person at home. I had a student who had kidney failure, and he had to do dialysis a lot. And he was told by another friend or whoever it was that he should never disclose that in the workplace, because people are going to assume that he is not going to be able to meet the hourly requirements or the things that he has to do. And so he hid that for a long time until it was, not figuratively, like bleeding out of him, because he had to go after work to get dialysis.
Right.
And that's a 6-hour thing that he had to do. So he wouldn't get home until about 2 a.m. And then he had to show up the next day at 8 a.m. He was exhausted. And so he didn't look like he was all there as far as being attentive and being engaging and all of these things. Well, of course you're not. You can't hide that type of thing. You've got to say, hey, I will get this work done. However, these are the hours in which I could do them.
Sure.
Most people, you're getting paid to do a job. Most people don't care how you get it done. They just care that you get it done. So you've got to be your own best advocate.
Yeah, I definitely think that's not something that's talked about a lot asking for changes in hours. So that's an interesting point that you brought up.
Absolutely.
I'm curious if Truist provides any like professional development activities like trainings, workshops that could maybe talk to that point or things similar to that for your staff.
We do. It is not as wide. So with a business resource group, you have to opt in order to get it. So that's number one. But I have some friends they're also passionate about this stuff. And so we kind of do little one-offs here and there. So we've done one for all of HR, for example, specifically on neurodiversity, because we definitely know that we have come across people that we've interviewed with a neurodiversity, and we just didn't know it. And they may have just been a little bit quirky or this or that and the third. But being aware of some of those things helps us as recruiters being able to talk to people of all diversities. But so we do those things. I think we are working towards getting to the point where we do have this type of training for everyone who interviews, period.
Sure.
But yes, we definitely give some support and the voice and all of those things.
Awesome. I see that we do just have someone join us. So if at any point you have questions, you're welcome to go ahead and ask in the chat or raise your hand. I'm curious, during the interview process and the application process, do applicants that have a disability, is that like asked on the applications, or is that something that you are asked like to disclose while you're applying?
It is a question that is optional in our process. So if you feel comfortable doing so, you can. And it's just, I think it's, do you identify as having a disability, yes or no?
Sure.
So it does not ask you for what type of disability, any of those things. We also have the little disability chat bot. So if you have any needs prior to an interview or accommodations that you need before coming into work, we have some of those things available. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Does anyone from the group have any questions they'd like to ask Luana about any type of interviewing with a disability or things that are offered from Truist specifically? All right, well, I think that we're going to go ahead and wrap up if no one has any more questions. Is there anything last minute that you'd like to add, Luana, to the students or employers who are here?
I would just say find a place that accepts you for who you are. I know that disability can be a scary thing to disclose. You don't know how people are going to perceive it. However, having said that, no one changes anything by just sitting there and taking it the way it is. Be your own best advocate, be your disability's best advocate, be the community's best advocate. Sometimes I have to think of myself as an advocate for somebody else, because sometimes advocating for myself feels weird. And so I think, okay, well, if this were my daughter, or if this were my husband, or if this were someone that I love, how would I respond to this? Or how would I ask about this? And my answer changes every time. It feels harder to do it for ourselves than it would for someone we love. And maybe think of yourself as that person you love, and then behave in that way. But don't apologize for it, and show up as yourself, and help move the needle in a positive direction. Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your expertise and experience with us. If any students are here, we do have a few more NDEAM meetups throughout the week. We have one at 2 on ADA and 1 tomorrow, and then 2 on Wednesday. So you can check out Higher Niner for that. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Thank you all.
Have a great day.
Happy NDEAM.